Most people think ancient empires were just big colored shapes on a map, but that is the biggest trap in history. A real empire was not just land. It was food, soldiers, taxes, roads, fear, law, gods, paperwork, and sometimes one extremely dramatic king saying, "This whole region is mine now." Because the real question is not, how big was the empire? The real question is, how much control did it unlock? Could it count grain, move armies, collect taxes, build roads, control rivers, replace local rulers, make strangers obey one law? And most importantly, could it survive after the founder died? So today, we are climbing the 7 levels of ancient empires, from tiny city-states to megasystems like Rome and Han China. Each level adds a new upgrade, and every upgrade creates a new problem. Level 1 is where empire is still basically a city with ambition. Think ancient Sumer, Uruk, Ur, Lagash, and other city-states in Mesopotamia. Each city had walls, temples, storehouses, priests, kings, farmers, and soldiers. On paper, this looks small, but this is where the empire starter pack appears. Writing, accounting, grain storage, taxes, walls, and organized labor. That sounds boring until you realize something. Before you can rule the world, you first need to count sheep without losing your mind. The temple was not just a religious building, it was also a control tower for the economy. Grain came in, workers were assigned, records were kept. The city could feed people, tax people, protect people, and tell people what the gods supposedly wanted. This is why level 1 matters. Empire starts with receipts. If a ruler cannot store food, count labor, and defend one city, he is not ready to run a region. But once city-states unlocked organization, they created a new problem. Every nearby city wanted the same farmland, the same trade routes, and the same prestige. Level 2 is when power stops being just one city and becomes a whole river system. Ancient Egypt is the cleanest example. The Nile gave predictable floods, fertile land, and a natural highway. That allowed rulers to organize harvests, move grain, move stone, build monuments, and make the king look divine. This level is not mainly about conquering everything. It is about turning geography into a machine. The river feeds the fields feed the people provide labor, the labor builds monuments, and the monuments tell everyone, this system is bigger than you. That is why pyramids are not just big tombs. They are proof of state coordination. You need food surplus, calendars, quarrying, transport, skilled labor, command structure, and belief. At level 2, the ruler is not just a city boss. He becomes the center of a landscape. The river becomes the conveyor belt of power. But once rulers unlocked river-scale control, they created a new problem. If the harvest failed, if legitimacy cracked, or if the center weakened, the whole machine could shake. Level 3 is when one ruler looks at nearby cities and thinks, nice economy, I will take all of it. The Akkadian Empire under Sargon is often treated as one of the first true empires because it united many Mesopotamian city-states under one power. This is a huge upgrade. Now, the problem is not just ruling your own people, it is ruling people who did not ask to be ruled by you. That means conquest is only step 1. After the army leaves, someone has to collect tribute, appoint governors, keep roads open, stop rebellions, and convince everyone that this new ruler is not just a temporary disaster with a crown. So, level 3 unlocks imperial propaganda. The king cannot just be strong, he has to look inevitable. His victories become monuments, his name becomes a brand, his rule becomes destiny. This is the moment empire becomes conquest plus control. But once rulers unlocked conquest, they created a new problem. Conquered cities remember being independent. They rebel. Governors become ambitious. Succession gets messy. And distance from the capital becomes a serious enemy. Level 4 is the Bronze Age Great Power Club. Egypt, the Hittites, Babylonia, Mitanni, and others were not random, isolated kingdoms. They fought, traded, married into each other, sent diplomatic letters, and competed over prestige. This is where the ancient world starts feeling weirdly modern. Kings call each other brothers. Royal marriages become strategy. Clay tablets become diplomatic messages. Basically, the Bronze Age had an ancient group chat, except every message was baked into clay and delivered by someone who had to survive the road. Chariots became elite battlefield technology. Bronze weapons and tools mattered. But bronze required copper and tin, which meant long supply chains. If those supply chains broke, the palace system felt it. At this level, empire is not just a king with soldiers. It is a network of palaces, diplomats, trade routes, chariot elites, and rival superpowers trying to flex without collapsing their whole system. But once rulers unlocked international great power politics, they created a new problem: complexity. When trade, diplomacy, warfare, and palace economies all depend on each other, one shock can travel through the whole network. Level 5 is where ancient empire gets scary. The Neo-Assyrian Empire built one of the most efficient military machines of the ancient world. Iron weapons, siege engines, professional armies, roads, intelligence networks, and brutal psychological warfare made resistance feel expensive. At earlier levels, a city wall could be a serious defense. At this level, the empire starts bringing siege towers, battering rams, engineers, logistics, and a message that says, if you resist, the example will be public. Cities were not just attacked, they were made into warnings. Deportations moved populations across the empire to break rebellions, supply labor, and weaken local identities. This is the hard-mode military empire. It does not just defeat enemies, it studies how to make future enemies afraid before the battle starts. But fear has a hidden cost. It expands fast, but it invoices you later. The more terror an empire uses, the more hatred it creates. The system needs constant force, constant victories, and constant intimidation. That is level 5's weakness. Fear can build an empire quickly, but it also creates enemies everywhere. Level 6 is when empire stops being only a war machine and becomes an operating system. The Achaemenid Persian Empire is the perfect example. Huge territory, satraps as regional governors, royal roads, couriers, standardized systems, and local traditions often left in place if loyalty and tribute continued. This is a different kind of power. Instead of trying to make every region identical, the empire asks a simpler question. Can this place pay tribute, stay loyal, and fit into the system? Roads become military tools, tax tools, communication tools, and psychological tools. A courier network can make a huge empire feel closer to the capital. Coins and weights can make trade easier. Provinces can make diversity manageable. The Maurya Empire in India and Qin China show similar logic. Centralize power, standardize rules, connect regions, and make the state easier to run at scale. This is the empire level where roads can be as powerful as armies. But once rulers unlocked continent-scale administration, they created a new problem. Bureaucracy itself becomes expensive. Provinces need supervision. Officials can become corrupt. Communication still takes time, and the bigger the system gets, the harder it is to coordinate. Level 7 is the classical mega-empire. Rome in the Mediterranean and Han China in East Asia. These empires were not just large, they created systems that lasted in people's minds long after the dynasties changed. Rome used roads, law, citizenship, legions, cities, and taxation to hold a giant world together. Its empire was not only an army, it was a legal imagination. People could become Roman. Cities could become Roman. Roads, language, law, and public architecture made the empire feel like a world. Han China used bureaucracy, frontier strategy, agriculture, roads, and a political model that shaped Chinese history for centuries. Its legacy was not just territory. It was a template for officialdom, statecraft, and imperial identity. Rome and Han were not the same, but they both show what level 7 means. The empire becomes more than a ruler. It becomes a civilization engine. At this level, the question is not only how the empire expands, it is what survives after it breaks. But even mega-empires have weaknesses. borders become expensive, elites compete, armies gain political power, taxes strain society, and succession can turn the state against itself. So here is the full ladder. Level 1, city-states learn to count and organize. Level 2, river kingdoms turn geography into power. Level 3, conquest empires learn to rule outsiders. Level 4, Bronze Age powers built international networks. Level 5, Iron Age empires weaponized fear and logistics. Level 6, Continental empires became administrative machines. And Level 7, classical mega-empires became civilization templates. The crazy part is that modern states still use versions of these ancient upgrades: taxes, roads, provinces, armies, law, propaganda, and identity. That is why ancient empires still matter. They were not primitive experiments. They were the testing ground for power systems humans still use today. The map is only the surface. The real story is the control layer underneath it. The ancient world was not primitive. It was the testing ground for almost every big power system humans still use today. So next time you see an empire on a map, do not just ask how big it was. Ask what level of control it had. Did it control food, rivers, cities, armies, roads, law, identity, legacy? That is where the real story begins. Comment which ancient empire deserves its own full video next. Rome, Persia, Assyria, Egypt, Maurya, Qin, or Han China.